Citizen Weekend, as we highlighted for you in our broadcast this evening, the IEBC commissioners will be retreating to Naivasha tomorrow with a resolution of their bitter differences topping the agenda. The NASA leadership still insists it will not participate in next month's polls unless the IEBC is overhauled, and among those are issues that we will be discussing this evening. With me in studio this evening is Raphael Tuju, Jubilee Party Secretary General. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
And we're also joined by Opio Wandai, who's the ODM Secretary for Political Affairs and also the Ugunja Member of Parliament. I'll start with you, Opio. What exactly is the bare minimum for NASA? We see IEBC commissioners retreating to put their house in order, but we heard from the NASA leadership tonight that they will not participate in next month's presidential poll unless the IEBC is completely overhauled.
There's actually consensus on the fact that the Supreme Court ruling did actually indict the IEBC in its entirety. In the pronouncement, it was clear that the IEBC did engage in illegalities and irregularities. And even before the pronouncement itself, if you look at the report of the judiciary, the registrar of the judiciary, following the inspection that was ordered by the court itself on the IEBC infrastructure, IT infrastructure, and the various forms, it was quite clear that certain persons within the IEBC, in connivance, of course, with outside forces, did commit unforgivable illegalities. And therefore, our position is very clear, that unless drastic measures are taken to address the personnel issues, and secondly, to address the systemic weaknesses, systemic malpractices that ensued during the voting and vote transmission process, there will be no point for us going into an election. It cannot simply be an election for the sake of an election. It must be a credible election within the meaning of the Constitution and the relevant laws.
Right. Having said that, Raphael, when NASA talks about outside forces, there have been claims of interference from the executive. They've actually spoken about executive interference with operations of IEBC. There's been talk of calls from high-profile government officials, withdrawal of security, and the perception, at least from NASA, is that Jubilee is IEBC and IEBC is Jubilee. How do you plan to deal with this? And indeed, for the electorate as well, and for your numbers, dealing with perception out there that there's been interference from the executive?
Well, we don't have to deal with it. I think let's put some things into perspective. In Parliament today, NASA is 104 members of Parliament less than Jubilee, which means Jubilee has 221 members of Parliament out of the 348. So the difference between NASA and Jubilee is that Jubilee has 104 members of Parliament more. In the Senate, Jubilee has 39 senators against 38 against 29 senators from the NASA side. If they could climb that high moral ground, they should not allow themselves to be sworn in as members of Parliament and senators.
But surely they do have a case when they point out illegalities and irregularities.
I'll go to legalities and regalities, and the irregularities and illegalities. The truth of the matter is that my brother Wandai here is a very intelligent man. I knew this man over 20 years ago. He was a corporate executive. I know that former Prime Minister Raila Odinga is an intelligent man. You don't get to that position unless you're intelligent. I know that Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka has been a vice president. He's also a very intelligent man. With these kind of differences, unless you're not intelligent, they should know they cannot win.
Let's talk about...
Because they cannot win,
yes,
that's why they'll bring any nonsense on the table to stop the election from taking place.
But tying into the differences and the numbers that you're pointing out, there's been very unlikely defections. When we talk about numbers, talking about, for instance, the surprise defection of Isaac Ruto, his return to Jubilee, Peter Munya, you know, his defecting to NASA, Ruben Dolo now aligning himself with Jubilee, and in Kambani we have former Wiper chair David Musila. Do these movements, or will these movements, I'll allow you to respond to what Raphael just pointed out right here, whether these movements will have any impact on the presidential poll. We're likely to see a shift in numbers because of the fact that some of these high-profile individuals, high-profile politicians, obviously had a following. Before you respond to that, Raphael, Opio, what is your response to Raphael's sentiments about their numbers obviously being the majority and therefore you not really having a case when you point out these irregularities by the IEBC?
I just want to point out that there is really no direct correlation between the presidential election results and the results of these other elections. There are various reasons or factors that contribute to the outcome of these other elections, whereas there are also other factors that contribute to the outcome of the presidential election. But having said that, what we are talking about as we speak is about the result of the presidential election, which we contested in the Supreme Court and which has been annulled by the Supreme Court. If there are people who are not content with the results of these other elections, they have gone to court, or they'll be going to court, and the courts will pronounce themselves on the matter. But more importantly, is the fact that even for these other elections, we strongly believe that there were malpractices, that a lot of machinations were done.
And if indeed there are malpractices, why then is it not enough for the commissioners, for instance, to do away with members of the Secretariat that they feel might have been responsible for these malpractices? Why is that not enough for you as NASA?
That is the point. We are saying that there's a clear pattern. There was a clear pattern in the outcome of these elections, which will be acted upon in due course through the court system. But secondly, our position has been that the IBC, as currently constituted, that is the IBC plus the Secretariat, cannot possibly conduct any other election to the satisfaction of not only Kenyans, but the satisfaction of the requirements. And therefore, in conclusion, with the IBC, what is the bare minimum for NASA? The bare minimum we have already communicated. We have indicated that the IBC needs to ensure that the officers who are implicated, either directly or indirectly, in the malpractices that ensued during the elections, must go home, must give way.
Let me respond a little bit to the legalities and irregularities. We have looked at this. The majority of them are from Mombasa County. And when we look at them, a lot of those illegalities and irregularities, we can see the hand of NASA's deliberate interference so that they could make this election not be credible. So they should be the last people to start talking about
deliberate interference. Could you be more specific?
Yeah, I could be more specific. A lot of those forms which are not signed, like Form 34B, the ones which are not signed are from their strongholds. How come? What a coincidence. And this is the same NASA who publicly admitted that they had moles within IBC, who are giving them information. Who are these moles? Are they still there? And what other functions were they doing for NASA at the IEBC?
Opio, are you privy to this information, that indeed the forms that were not signed were from NASA strongholds, majority of those?
That is fairy tale. But what is important what is important is that if you interfere with the election system, the electoral system, if you occasion malpractices, you can only do so with a view to influencing the outcome. The outcome here was, the supposed outcome here was clearly in favor of Jubilee and Uhuru Kenyatta. NASA could not have interfered with the elections to hand over power or victory to Uhuru Kenyatta. It's common sense, really.
And I like just to go into this. You know, one of the things which I would like to ask my brother Opio and I is that let them go back as NASA and start talking the same language, because I was in a similar forum with their chairman, Honorable the chairman of ODM, my brother, your chairman is Mr. Mbadi, Honorable Mbadi, and he said boycott is not on the table. That was 2-3 days ago. He said it on public TV, I was there, and he said boycott is not on the table. Today, and now we hear that unless this is done, they are boycotting. I want to tell you something. As Jubilee, we are in no mood of giving them sweets and candy to come and compete with us. If they want to boycott, they are free to boycott. This country will move on. Let me say something, Lillian. We have never used the word boycott. What we have said is that in the event that the conditions we have laid on the table, which conditions were laid out actually by the Supreme Court itself, are not met, there can possibly be no elections. Yeah.
Should your conditions be met, then the election will continue as slated.
If they are not met, there can possibly be no elections. That is the point, really, that needs to be driven home.
It amounts very clearly is boycott.
Okay, and let's proceed to the defections, whether the numbers will change because of the shift of allegiance. I had pointed out to you, of course, as you saw in our earlier bulletin today, some of the defections, for instance, we saw the Ukambani defections today. There's also been some earlier in the week, those of Isaac Ruto. Whether numbers will change because of the shift of allegiance. Let's start with you, Raphael. For instance, Isaac Ruto's returning to Jubilee, very interesting development there. Do you see these defections shifting in your favor? Jubilee, of course, you took it in the August polls, but this time round, will this be of any significance for you?
Well, we're seeing a trooping of a lot of Kenyan leaders coming to our side as we face this runoff. I think on balance, I think we've had more come to our side than any that anybody would imagine has joined them. You can talk about Honorable Tuoma, Honorable Karanga, Honorable former Speaker Marende. Those are significant leaders from that part of the country. And so they're joining our team to campaign for us. We had David Musila this afternoon and a few others from Ukambani. They are joining our team to campaign for President Uhuru. Of course, I know that he's going to discount the effect of that.
Yes, because there's a sense that these are political survivors.
Mr. Tuju could be reading my mind, but you see.
So I know he's going to discount that. But they went to town when Munya went to their side. They went to town. I mean, the whole Prime Minister was there and they went preaching to us how, well, the whole of Meru has shifted to their direction.
But you did the same with Isaac Ruto.
Yeah, they're the same. But you see, let's say that Munya only went with his vote. And let's say Isaac Ruto has only come with his vote. Let's add Utuoma, let's add Akaranga, let's add Marende. In all fairness, give us 5 against 1.
You know, Lilian, our conviction is that Kenyans decided a long time ago how they would vote in these elections. And indeed, they did vote and Raila Odinga emerged the winner. That is our position. Now, these other movements, of course, you can't stop them because every Kenyan has got the right and the freedom of association. And whenever people join us, we welcome them. And even those of them who are leaving us to join the other side, we wish them well. But the most important thing is to realize is that Kenyans have long decided that they are fed up with this Jubilee administration. And they did speak on the 8th of August. It's only that their voice was stifled. Their voice was subverted. Through machination
earlier when Raphael pointed out that Jubilee has majority numbers, you dismissed that. But let's talk about the fact that in August the voter turnout was about 74%. I'm directing this question to you first. And this was largely driven by competition at the local level. This time we are seeing national politics playing at hand. Do you think voter turnout will be as high as it was in August, now that we're looking at politics at a national level and not looking at the other elective positions, those of governor, member of county assembly, women rep, and the other positions?
I believe if everything is done right and the conditions we have talked about are met, Kenyans will still come out in their large numbers to send a strong message to this administration, and therefore don't expect much change in terms of the voter turnout. Yeah, give or take 5 or 5 plus 5%. Yeah.
Raphael, your thoughts?
Well, you know, I must say that I admire the capacity of NASA and their team, their leader, including my brother, the Honorable Wandai, their capacity to ignore facts. When in a parliament of 349 members of parliament, right now 348, 221 are in Jubilee, and there are 104 members of parliament less. And then somehow they begin to think that they can win this thing. They amaze me. But let me go a little bit further, because you just said something that Kenyans already decided how they're going to vote. And I'd like to recall the sentiments of the former Prime Minister just at the time when we were finishing, just before we finished the mass voter registration, the second time in early this year, in February. And it was him who said that this election is going to be won based on how the strongholds register to vote. I'm quoting him. It wasn't our side, it was their side. And I want to tell you, as the Secretary General of Jubilee Party, is that we knew we had won this thing in February this year. That's fact.
Based on voter registration.
Based on voter registration. Any intelligent person knows that. What Kenyans should be asking themselves is that such intelligent people, and you don't even have to be a political scientist to be able to know these are the strongholds, these are the swing, and these are the strongholds of the opponents. NASA needed to win all the swing areas by 90% for them to win. It is mathematically impossible for them to win. But still,
Lillian,
I admire them. I really admire your
words.
Mr. Tuju amazes me. I think because we can forgive him because he's been out of the elective politics for some time. But you must understand that even as you argue here, those numbers have been nullified by none other than the Supreme Court. So there are numbers actually talk about. And therefore the issue of strongholds, NASA strongholds, Jubilee strongholds, is neither here nor there. The fact of the matter is that even in those so-called swing areas, it is where these merchants of election theft did their utmost best to ensure that they torpedoed our numbers to their advantage. But that is aside. The most important thing for now, I wish you would listen to me. When I speak, I speak from a position of authority. I'm the Secretary for Political Affairs of the largest political party in this region.
And please hold that thought of you. We'll come back to you on that. In news just in, news reaching our newsrooms this evening is that St. George's is on fire. St. George's Girls School, Nairobi, is on fire. This coming a week after Moi Girls High School here in Nairobi also suffered a similar fate when a fire broke out within the dormitory of the Form 1 students that reside within the school's premises. News just in indicating that St. George's Girls School is on fire. We'll be getting you more details on that as and when we get them. Those are the reports that are reaching our newsroom. We don't know the extent of the fire as of now, but news reaching our newsrooms is that St. George's Girls School is on fire. St. George's is located here on Dennis Pritt Road, which is just close to our communication center here in Nairobi, and that is of course also very close to State House Nairobi. We're following up on that story. We're bringing you details as and when we get them. The game of numbers, Opio, you were closing on that. I was
basically summarizing my comment. If you want to confirm that these friends of ours are speaking from both sides of the mouth, you look at the tone, language of their president and their deputy president. If for sure they had the numbers and they are convinced they have the numbers as we speak, they won't be speaking in the tone they're using of late, because that tone is a tone of people who are panicking, people who are desperate, people who are seeing power slipping through their fingers. Okay, so we are convinced, and we want to ask Bwana Chebukati and his team to put their house in order.
Yes, and you spoke extensively on that appeal. Yes. Let's move away from that and talk about financing. NASA launched a pay bill number and account for fundraising. Jubilee has scoffed at this. We saw placards today in Uhuru Park, Raphael, with a supporter there saying Jubilee doesn't need a sponsor. To you, and that of course is coming from the Jubilee support and indeed from the Jubilee political fraternity. Is Jubilee using state resources, Raphael? Because the feeling on the ground away from the IEBC, where we've already talked about perception that there's executive interference, is that you seem to have a head start because you are suspected as a party to be using state resources.
I think for me the biggest news as far as abuse of office is concerned was the revelation that every day a loophole of 24 million shillings which has been disappearing from City Hall has just been plugged by the new governor. 24 million per day is 8.7 billion per year. In the 4.5 years when that seat at County Hall was under NASA, a total of 38 billion shillings has been stolen. 38 billion is enough money to do a superhighway like the one we have to Thika. Now, that for me, they take the cake when it comes to abuse of official positions. And that same thing, we know what was happening with respect to Kilifi. The former Prime Minister was always the first to defend his governors. So I don't think I want us to go there. And I'd like to say that
I don't really think you've answered my question.
No, because the thing is that we know we don't use state resources. We've had major fundraisings. One of them was at Safari Park Hotel, and it was 1 million shillings a plate. And we worked very hard. We still work very hard, talking to our supporters, talking to our friends, asking them to help us out. Now, for me, why I'm saying this is answering your question is that why now? All of a sudden, because now they don't have the governor of Nairobi, and of course a lot of money has not been released to the local to the counties. The top
was the former governor financing?
Yes, he was financing.
Was he the one that was primarily financing?
Not only that, was he the one who was financing? He announced he was financing.
Lillian,
he did announce he was financing.
I think would be degenerating into
it is in the public domain.
Is NASA broke? That's what your supporters are asking. That's what your political competitors are asking. They're actually scoffing at you and saying that you don't stand a chance in this election because you don't have the financing to effectively campaign against them.
Let me start by saying that we are in a country that is governed by the rule of law. So if there is any evidence that somebody was stealing money from either City Hall or whichever county, for that matter, there are avenues.
Can I answer that?
No, let me just finish. They need to take the evidence to the relevant authorities for the culprits to be apprehended and taken to court and charged. But secondly, even a kindergarten pupil would tell you that Jubilee has been misusing state resources, state and public resources, throughout the campaign period.
But away from Jubilee, are your coffers empty?
I was coming to that earlier.
Yes.
Yeah. Thirdly, the NASA pay bill number is not any new development. That pay bill number, Lillian, has been in existence even before the Supreme Court made the ruling, before the elections. We are only relaunching it. And it is not something new. Even in developed democracies, public contributes money to campaigns, and the public.
Although we haven't seen it being used as aggressively as we.
Well, you see, maybe because we've not been keen. Yes, but I can tell you from a point of knowledge that the bulk of our financing has come from small-time contributors, the Mamambogas, the Juakali people who believe in our cause, and they'll continue to do so, whether Jubilee runs or not. Because Jubilee believes in some funny philosophy that doesn't resonate with the rest of Kenyans.
Question to my dear brother. If Jubilee has any evidence that governors were using county money to run the NASA campaigns, you state very clearly that we should go to court. Correct?
Right.
Arrest them. You have the machinery.
Precisely.
Yes.
In the same way, since you like to go to court so much, why don't you go to court with respect to any accusations you have that Jubilee is using state resources?
Yeah, we took them to
and then, moving away from that, Opio, let's talk about Parliament. NASA MPs plan to boycott Tuesday's address by President Uhuru Kenyatta. This is an extension of your dispute over his annulled re-election. Is that the case? Just give us some more on this issue and what your stand is as members of Parliament. Do you plan to boycott this particular ceremony come Tuesday?
Lillian, I have read very keenly the Constitution, Article 132, Article 134, and 142, and the relevant statutes, including the standing orders. Nowhere in the Constitution and the standing orders do we find that anything untoward would happen if the President does not address the opening of a new Parliament. That is one. Two, the writers of the Constitution could not have envisaged a situation where a lame duck president, a limping president for that matter, would come to Parliament to address Parliament when he is at the same time on the campaign trail trying to save his skin. We as members of NASA, and if I may speak actually for myself, I find it politically untenable to sit in Parliament and listen to a person with whom my party leader is competing.
So you will not be there?
I will definitely not be there.
You will not be there.
Yeah.
Can I comment the President, we understand, has said that he will continue with the ceremony with or without the opposition.
Yes. Can I comment on that? I think I would have a lot of respect for my NASA friends if they also carried out the threat that they were not going to go for the swearing in. But they went for the swearing in.
Right.
But they're not going for the official opening now. It's just because, it's this thing of having a big stomach and no backbone. That's it basically this. I'll
be coming to you for your closing remarks, but for now, those are the pictures we're getting from Moi Girls School here in Nairobi. Moi Girls School is along Dennis Pritt Road, which is the road that leads to State House, Nairobi. And as you can see there, a fire in the school. We don't know exactly as of now which particular building has caught that fire. And remember, this fire is coming exactly a week after Moi Girls High School here in Nairobi suffered a similar fate with 9 fatalities reported there at Moi Girls High School. That was last week. A week later, we're seeing St. George's Girls School on fire. This is breaking news, and these are the pictures we're getting as of now. This is the state of affairs at the Moi Girls School in Nairobi. There are firefighters on location. We'll be getting to know more about what exactly the extent of this fire is, what might have caused it, and indeed, if at all, this is an arson attack or whether or not it might have been an electrical fault. We are yet to get more details surrounding this fire. And in news just in, we are made to understand that this fire actually broke out in the kitchen, and it is being controlled. The fire is being controlled, and therefore authorities there calling for calm. There are no fatalities, no casualties that have been reported. This fire broke out within the school's kitchen, and therefore firefighters are on location, and we are made to understand are controlling the fire. This is St. George's Girls School here in Nairobi along Dennis Pritt Road, and a fire has broke out within the school's kitchen. It is a boarding school, and for now what we understand is that there have been no injuries, no casualties. The fire broke out within the school's kitchen, and those are the pictures we're getting as of now. We'll be getting more details on that. Back here in studio, as we get to your closing remarks, gentlemen, we were talking about the opening of the new parliament as NASA threatens not to be in attendance. Raphael, I believe you were giving us your closing remarks on the same.
Well, I said that, I would have had a lot more respect for them if they boycotted the swearing in, because that was about their stomach. But you know, let me not go that direction. I think that for me, in terms of closing remarks, I want to thank Kenyans for having lined up, and I want to thank especially our supporters, Jubilee supporters. They were very angry after the ruling of the Supreme Court, but they handled it in an amazing, peaceful manner. There were no tires burning on the roads, there were no stones thrown, there were no railway lines uprooted. And I'd like to appeal to my brother here that on the 17th and shortly after that, please do appeal to your supporters as well, that if they lose, let them not have burnt tires. I know that you are priming them to feel that they're going to win, but I think Kenyans are sensible enough to see the difference. You don't have Parliament. You're down by 104 members of Parliament. You don't have the Senate. Jubilee has no MCAs. I mean, the writing is on the wall, and I think you guys are intelligent enough to know that. Thank you very much.
I thank you for your time, Raphael Tuju, Jubilee Secretary General. We're closing now. We must go to St. George's to see what exactly is happening there. Therefore, very few seconds for you, Opio, as we close this conversation.
As we wait for the IBC to put its facts together, I want to remind Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta that it is, I think, Wole Soyinka who once wrote that a tiger does not proclaim its sanctity. It pounces. So stop reminding us that you are a president when you had all the time with the full powers of the presidency for the last 5 years, and you did nothing with them. Instead, you escalated the corruption, you enhanced tribalism. So these little powers that you have currently under temporary incumbency should not mesmerize you. So stop reminding us of those imaginary powers.
And we are just about a month to go to the polls, 17th of October. It is, and therefore, may the best man win. Thank you very much for your time, gentlemen. Raphael Tuju, Jubilee Party Secretary General, and Opio Wandai, ODM Secretary for Political Affairs, and also the Ugunja Member of Parliament. Thank you. We are continuing to bring you live, pictures. We are